Well, good morning, Thursday morning. This is our thought for today. As you know, we've been working through this passage in Mark chapter 6, really from verse 20 through to verse 29. The full passage we looked at back on Sunday was verses 14 to 29. This desperate passage where King Herod, or Herod the Tetrarch, got himself in a real mess. He got himself caught, as we often say, between a rock and a hard place. We got him into a position where he was fascinated by John the Baptist but didn't do anything about it, where he was tempted by the plaudits of men, and he fell to that temptation and gave in and offered somebody something he didn't have to offer, paid a price he couldn't afford to pay. Someone lost their life because of his rashness, and he's got himself in such a mess here. And it could all so easily have been sorted out if he had the understanding of knowing what John the Baptist was saying, asking the questions he should have asked about who Jesus was, getting into that relationship with Jesus, so that when he heard about Jesus, there wasn't this sense of flashback to what had happened with John the Baptist, but rather there was a sense of wanting to get to know Jesus better. And because everything was the wrong way around with him, he made an awful mistake which cost someone his life, but also which created an awful sense of, I suppose, this feeling of just not knowing what to do, this sense of not being able to understand the situation because of what had happened. Herod got himself in such a mess. And we want to look today at one of the problems that existed with the sin that he was in. Now, we thought back, I think it was Tuesday morning, of how on his birthday he invited all these people, and we read that on his birthday he gave a banquet for his nobles, his military commanders, and the leading men of Galilee. So basically anyone who was anyone was there. Every man who was important was invited to this. So we have to assume that this huge big hall was full of these men. Now, there would have been most likely good food there, but there was also possibly the potential for them to drink as much as they wanted. And probably some drink had been taken, far too much of it perhaps, and there was a sense of things were getting slightly out of order. Herodias sends in her daughter, who does this dance, and you can imagine all the whooping and cheering going on there. And Herod then decides to make this promise that he really shouldn't have made. And at the point where he realizes he's gone too far is where she comes back in after speaking to her mother and says, okay, I'll have the head of John the Baptist. At that point, Herod suddenly realized where he was. He was caught between pleasing this woman, because he's made this promise, but he's also caught between the men who are there as well. But ultimately he's caught knowing that John the Baptist is someone that he was meant to protect. And so he's caught between a rock and a hard place. The men are all cheering, yes, give her what she wants, give her what she wants. And he's saying, no, but I can't give her John the Baptist, because John the Baptist is someone important. And I'm fascinated by him, and I need to protect him. And so he knew what the right thing to do was. If you remember, we thought earlier on about how for Herod, verse 20, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man. So there was that sense of knowledge that he knew that he was dealing with somebody who wasn't just Joe Bloggs, but somebody important. And all of a sudden he's caught between trying to please men and trying to please God, knowing there's a sense of holiness. No, there was something going on with Herod. He knew that there was something higher. There was a spiritual aspect here. And he knew that he couldn't give John the Baptist's head. But the men were shouting and cheering, you've got to give what you promised. And so he's caught, in a sense, between a rock and a hard place, caught in a situation where he's trying to please man, but he also wants to please this spiritual side, this godly side of John the Baptist that he didn't want to kill. And the problem was that the noise and the clamour of the world was so loud and so imposing upon him that he hadn't the strength to turn against it. He hadn't the strength to say, no, this is too much. I know I said that, I shouldn't have said it. I'm going to back down. Listen, I'll tell you what, for your dance, I'll give you this. And he could have given her some money, or he could have given her something else. It doesn't really matter, but he could have given her something other than what she was asking. Now, he would have faced the cheers and the jeers of the men who were there, and them throwing things at him, probably saying, you promised. But at the end of the day, yes, all he would have been known as someone who made a stupid promise, but backed down on it. And John the Baptist would have lived. but he gave in. He was deafened by the noise of the world, and he gave in, and he did something by killing John the Baptist that we know caused Jesus great concern and caused John the Baptist's disciples great concern. And we're thinking about that tomorrow. Caught between man and God, caught between doing what he knows is right and what he knows is wrong. So often in life there's a temptation to be men pleasers, to be people pleasers, to do that everyone wants you to do because you know you're going to lose face if you don't, or they're going to shout things at you, they're going to call you names, they're never going to let you forget it. And yet if you do what you know is right, what is morally right, what is spiritually right, what you know God wants you to do, well then you know you have God's face shining upon you, and you also have strength to face the next temptation. And we so often find ourselves caught with trying to be people pleasers, but yet knowing what we should do. So I want to encourage you today, if somehow you've given in to people in the past and you know you shouldn't have, you can be forgiven for that. But you also need to have the strength to stand up against them the next time. And you will only get that strength if you ask the Lord to come and help you. We need to be God pleasers, not men pleasers. Men pleasers will always ask too much of us, and we will always give in if we do not have the strength to stand against them. So often it's difficult, and especially if you're watching this and you're at school or university, you will find it particularly difficult. Or if you're in a business and there are a lot of people involved in it, you're asked to make decisions which you know are wrong, but yet you don't want to lose face. This is an age-old problem. Herod faced it here in Mark chapter 6. We face it on a daily basis. And so I'm praying for you today, if you're in that situation, stand firm, do what you know is right, do what you know the Lord wants you to do. Each victory will help you some other to win. The old song says we need to stand on the victories that God gives us through standing against the world, standing against what man says, and doing what we know God wants us to do. We're going to think a little bit more, just one final thought tomorrow morning, Friday morning, as we take some time just to round off this passage together. Thanks for being with me. Have a good Thursday, and we'll see you tomorrow. God bless.